Hey guys, it's EJ again, and today I decided to bring you guys a complete beginner's guide to Shadow Priest. I am talking about beginners. So, disclaimer, not meant for elite level or gladiator players. You might find some things useful here when I go over some tips and tricks, but it is meant for the lower tier. So, what I mean by that is I'm going to go over all spells, PvP talents, why we use them, macros, tips and tricks that I use and other Shadow Priests that might use that you guys might not know or think about, compositions, and why we even have stat prio. What does that even mean? Why do we choose what we choose? I'm going over everything. This is meant for beginners, so you know exactly what we are thinking at the higher level of the game, um, and that way you have that complete knowledge. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I made a completely new talent tree here for us to go over each stat. So we're going to go over Shadow first, Devouring Plague. What is Devouring Plague? It is your spender ability, but also your main go ability. So you want to make sure you have Devouring Plague up for your go for two reasons. One, it does a lot of damage on hit. I've had these things crit for about 200,000 on a retail, and also because of your mastery. Shadow Priest Mastery. Next point here. Our mastery is based explicitly on our dots. So for each dot on a target, we do 7.7% damage based on my build. So about 8%. Let's say you do a go without Devouring Plague up. That's 8% less damage you're doing. That could be the difference of a kill. All right. Make sure you have it up. It's affected by your dots. It makes you do more damage. Um, and also, like I said, it's your spender for your insanity. Does a lot of pumpage. It also stacks its damage, so you can put the dot and stack the dot over 6 seconds. You got 2 or 3 of these up, you're doing a lot of dot ticks in 6 seconds. The reason why Divine Plague is so strong, damage-wise, is it's on a very short duration to pump out all of its dot damage. So if you get a couple of these stacked, you can do 300,000-400,000 damage on a go in 6 seconds. So just very important to keep up. Next down here, we're going silence. Gotta go silence. I'm sure you guys all know how the goes go. If you don't, silence is one of the only blankets left in the game. You don't need to have somebody cast to kick them. You just throw out your silence, right? You throw out your silence. Boom. There it is. And it stops them from casting, can force a trinket right off their rip if their teammate's getting low. It's very important to make sure you have silence up, all right? Next up over here is Shadowy Apparitions. Shadowy Apparitions is a passive. All you do is pop your Mind Blast, your Devouring Plague, or your Void Torrent, and you'll pop out this little apparition ghost thing, right? And the ghost does a lot of pad damage over time, and if it crits, it'll do 100% more damage. And that used to be different back in the day. If it crit, it used to summon 2 apparitions. Now it's 100% damage. Don't try to worry about crits as much, but that just being said, you can get lucky, get like 5 or 6 of these on the go, and get a little bit of pad damage in everybody. That's kind of what we're meant to do. Pad, CC, outlive, and win. So it's just a nice passive, and don't think too much about it. It will just come out naturally. Dispersion. I'll give you guys a little bit of tips and tricks about dispersion that I want you guys to know. One, it's your main defensive, right? Damage reduction, heals you over time, increases your movement speed, and reduces all of your snares. So you can just run, right? Good. If you're in trouble, it's a good thing to do. When your healers CC'd, you're low, they're going to kill you. Get yourself in line of sight afterwards. There's a lot of things you can do with this because of the mobility. But things you guys need to know is you can die in dispersion with a couple of reasons. One, if something is in the air projectile-wise. So if there's a glacial spike in the air and then you disperse, you're still going to take the full damage. All right? So that 75% damage reduction will not save you. You will still get hit. Same with the Chaos Bolt. If a Chaos Bolt's in the air and then you decide to disperse, it's going to hit you for the full damage. Because when Chaos Bolt and Glacial Spike is sent, their damage is sent based on them in the air. So once you disperse, it does not decalculate their damage. The only things that stop that sort of thing are complete immunities like Magic Bop, Bubble, Ice Block. Things that completely negate all damage will negate that. But any damage reductors do not once they're in the air, okay? Secondly, Touch of Death from Monks will kill you in Dispersion if you drop below the threshold. That 75% damage will not save you. So let's say you disperse at like 17%. You get dropped down to like 14%. They decide to Todd you. You will die. All right? It goes through Dispersion for some reason. It just, that's how it works. So to keep that in mind, all right, guys? Secondly, down here, there are two options. This one gives you a shield from healing with your Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague. They do absolutely zero healing. You should never touch this. I guess maybe in PvE you could use this, but in PvP, this will do nothing for you because your dots do not heal for anything. Maybe 5,000. So this is useless. But this, on the other hand, this is what gives us the additional 25% healing and reduces the cooldown that you see up here. All right. Now comes to one of my favorite abilities in the game. It's called Misery. For what you guys don't know, Misery is the ability that when you Vampiric Touch, it puts up Shadow or Pain also at an additional 5 seconds. This saved us so many globals when they put this in the game, guys. Imagine having to VT Shadow or Pain like back in the old days, but then getting dispelled, and then you have a billion kicks, a billion whatever, and having to recast both of them on globals, right? That additional 1 second every time, we already have a hard enough time being the only caster. Misery is a must. It's also just so good quality of life. All right, that's all this is. Second core or last word. So last word used to be picked when you were playing with rogues because, you know, they just stun everything. You don't need a stun. Every 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you had to go to follow up their 22 second go. And you would just silence off of it. So you had a silence every time because they would just stun the healer anyways. Going into the War Within, I don't even think, even if you wanted to, which was still rare, to go last word, because their stun got nerfed to 30 seconds, their kidney, so it's going to be off kilter. So that means every second or third go, you'll have stun lined up with their stun. Second core is always going to be the way outside of maybe rogue, but even then, don't think you're ever going to spec out a second core. It's niche. I'm sure people will say it's niche, like, oh no, you could. You could. I wouldn't recommend it. Stun, fear, silence goes is what we're known for. Super strong, right? This is just, you got to go second core. It gives us the 4 second stun. It's awesome. All right. Let's go down here to Surge of Insanity. Surge of Insanity is our main damage in pre-patch, but also if you've been watching the beta, our Mind Flays hit like a truck, guys, like a truck. This is our main ability. This is when you, every time you Devouring Plague twice, you get a Mind Flay Insanity. Coming Tuesday, I believe, right? The 13th. This is going to get the beta change with everything else, so it will stack 4 times. It's going to do its damage over 1.5 seconds. So this will go from 1.4 seconds to like 1 second, 1.1 second on retail once we get that, because it's already like 1.3 or 1.4 on lower haste on beta. So this is going to feel really good. But this is the chunkiness right here. Everyone's going to be going Mind Flay. It's going to do the same amount of damage, or actually no, it's going to do more damage on the same cast time as a Mind Spike. Mind Spike you can choose if you want that second School of Magic. If you don't know what Mind Spike is, it's the Shadow Frost damage that if you get kicked, you can just spam the spikes and that little 2 spikes over your head. Animation, that's what this is. It does Shadow Frost, which means if you get kicked on Shadow, you can still cast Mind Spike. But if you get kicked on Mind Spike, you can't cast anything, okay? Because it's Shadow Frost. It's like Chaos Bolt for Warlocks. Get kicked on Fire, you can cast Chaos Bolt. Get kicked on Chaos Bolt, you can't cast anything because it's Chaos damage. It counts as all damage. So keep that in mind with Mind Spike, but I don't think there's any reason to ever go it. That's Surge of Insanity. It also generates more Insanity over time. Psychic Link. What is Psychic Link? This is our pad, most pad damage here, especially next season in the War Within. All of our damage that's single target outside of our apparitions, Shadow or Pain, and Touch, do 30% damage to everyone affected by Vampiric Touch. Now, just so you guys know, our Devouring Plagues work with this, right? The Devouring Plague damage and dot do work with Psychic Link, which benefits us when we're spamming those Devouring Plagues, so everyone gets hit by it, right? So this is just a great way to keep pad damage up, hit healers when they're dotted, right? You dot the healer, you burst somebody, healer's taking damage, healer gets low, swap healer, right? That's a lot of how our build works. So Second Link is awesome. One of my favorite things they put in the game. Over here is Thought Harvester. This just gives us the additional Mind Blast. I think me, along with a bajillion other people, would agree. I wish we didn't have to spec this. I wish we could not spec into the extra Mind Blast. I don't think it's needed. Especially with Void Weaver being not as strong, so the double Void Blast doesn't mean anything. But hey, I mean, that's insanity and that's aberrations, right, guys? So it's something you can spam in between your goes. And it does technically do more damage than just a regular channel. So we're going to go ahead and that's all that is. So on Tuesday, I will be going the Homing Missile Shadow Crash over the Aimed Shadow Crash. And the only reason that is because with the Homing Missile, if a healer is going behind Pillar, you can just shoot them as they LOS, they'll still get hit. So the whole issues I had before of having to aim behind a healer or get people out of stealth, or just the simple fact that the homing missile they could dodge it. Well, now that you can't dodge the homing missile, it feels really good to press on the beta. There will be situations where if you need to stop people from drinking, you could run Shadow Crash. But this homing missile is it's instant, right? You don't think about it. Even if a rogue, let's say, gets out of stealth, and then you just get that 1 second to target him, and then it'll shoot the missile at him and get him, instead of having to, oh wait, he's over there, drag your cursor, shoot your Shadow Crash, and it might miss, right? So this guarantees to keep people from resetting. So I will be saying to go the left Shadow Crash, the one that says at your target, hurlable at your target, instead of location. Hopefully they'll change this to a Void Crash, and because it has the different animation on retail than it does on beta, at least. But this should be called Void Crash, and this should be called Shadow. But the one that says at target is the one I will be using. The other one is just at location. So location one right here, like as you can see, this is the Shadow Crash for location that we're currently using. The other one's what I'm gonna use, okay? But just for now, we'll spec that. Just to go off the Shadow Crash tree, Whispering Shadows is the ability that applies VT to all targets that get hit by Shadow Crash. This also does work in synergy with Misery, okay? So when you hit somebody with Shadow Crash and it applies VT, well, when it says right here, VT also applies Shadow Word Pain. So these work together with each other. So this is really great to get all your dots out to people, all right? So that's what Whispering Shadow does with Shadow Crash. Next up over here on this next line, we're going to go with Unfurling Darkness. Unfurling Darkness is another way for us to get our dots out instantly. You Vampiric Touch somebody, and then you get this buff, and then you can get a free instant cast Vampiric Touch that does a lot of on-hit damage. As you can see, it says 100,000. I've had this thing hit for 200 plus. Insane on the retail. I've hit for 1.1 million, almost 2 million on beta. A lot of on-hit damage, right? So when you're bursting, you could have an Unfurling Darkness, a Void Bolt, Divine Plague on hits, a lot of instant damage. It's really good. I like it a lot. But just also is another way to get free dots out without casting. As the only real caster, I feel like this is needed. Okay? Next up is Dark Ascension or Void Eruption. I go Void Eruption, as I think most people do. On the beta, so you have a mix. People like having, for some reason, Dark Ascension to just... I honestly don't know what the whole point of it is. I have seen no value out of it. It doesn't buff Mind Blast that much because we don't really hit Mind Blast. It can buff Catharsis, which we'll go over what Catharsis is later. And it can buff your on hits. But people don't generally worry about that on the beta for damage. Our damage comes out of our Surge of Insanity, which this does not buff, right? But Void Eruption, on the other hand, gives us Void Bolts, which give us Insanity, which gives us a free on hit to move around also, right? It's an instant cast, it hits pretty chunky, and it gives us Insanity, so it's just more pad damage, more pretty decent on hit damage, and gives us more Devouring Plagues. I feel like the majority of us do run Void Eruption, but the difference between the two is one is a you have to have a target, which is Void Eruption has to have a target, and then you go into Void form, which you throw Void Bolts out at. It also gets increased its duration when you use Devouring Plague by 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. It lets you stay in there longer. Dark Ascension, on the other hand, only buffs non-periodic damage. So it does not buff Mind Flay, and it does not buff Void Torrent or our dots, which is our main damage in pre-patch and in the beta. So you can run it if you want to run the Mind Spike, right? If you run Mind Spike builds, then Dark Ascension is great because it buffs Mind Spike. If you don't run Mind Spike, I feel like you just need to run Void Eruption, guys. Again, this doesn't buff anything else but the on hits. So Mind Spike, Death, Mind Blast, Catharsis, and those aren't big hitters at the moment. So keep that in mind. Next, you can run Mental Decay here. I think a lot of us are swapping over to Mental Decay out of some other things for the simple fact that it buffs our Mind Flay. And since our Mind Flay is our biggest damage, it's nice to have that. But also, what's really nice about Mental Decay is that it resets our dots when we use our channels or our Mind Spike. So we don't have to reapply as much when we're bursting. It will extend our dots. So it's really nice to have for Mental Decay, extending our dot duration. All right, let's go down here. I do not take Ancient Madness unless I'm running Mind Spike builds, because crit is a very minimal stat for Shadow Priest for a while now, since BFA, and it's only 10% that diminishes. So with our builds currently, we don't run it, but in the War Within, it might have a place with some of the crit Mind Flay builds for some one-shot comps. But right now, I'm just giving us a generalization build, so we don't really go there. Shadowy Insight. Shadowy Insight is the passive that when we do Shadow Word Pain ticks, we get the free little Mind Blast above our heads, and it just gives us an instant cast Mind Blast, which is okay. Gives Insanity, and it also summons an Apparition. In Void Weaver builds, if you get this during your Rift, you get a free Void Blast. So very nice if Void Weaver gets buffed and is stronger than Archon. That's just a nice thing to have. Outside of that, it's just a nice free instant Insanity, some damage. But as of right now, it's not the biggest thing in the world. Still, I think we spec into it. Over here, Void Touch is a must. Void Touch increases the Devouring Plague damage, and it gives us 50 more Insanity, which means we very rarely get capped before we use Devouring Plagues. Beforehand, before we even had Void Touch, before the rework, we got capped a lot on Insanity. So this is a very nice quality of life change. Down here, you can either choose Mind's Eye or Distorted Reality. Throughout the expansion, we have interchanged these based on what was good. Back in the day, before our Insanities were, before they were our main damage, and also before they nerfed it, it used to be every cast of Devouring Plague gave you a surge. Now it's every 2. So we used to run Distorted Reality because we got so many of these. They're always up. But now with our Insanities being our main damage, and it costs 2 of them, Mind's Eye is the better option. It reduces the Insanity cost of Devouring Plague by 5, while this one increases the damage by 20 over 12 seconds. So we do have a longer duration of it. It keeps our mastery up. Each tick, though, is weaker, and it costs 5 Insanity more. So it takes longer to get these surges up. While Mind's Eye is 10 less, technically, than this one. So this gives us more Insanity surges faster, and means we do more damage. So this is why we go Mind's Eye. That's the reason we choose it. Alright. Now we're going to go over here to Maddening Decay, or Maddening Touch, sorry. This increases our Vampiric Touch damage by 30% and gives us a chance to get Insanity every time it ticks. This was a huge quality of life change because, one, Vampiric Touch did not used to give us Insanity on its ticks, and then we got to rework, and then it did. We love that. Now our dots just passively generate Insanity for us, so we get more Devouring Plagues. This is great for multi-dotting. I love this. I will say, 30% increased damage here, and then if you guys run Void Weaver, you'll see we have a 20% increased damage there. Kind of scares me for the future that our dots, let's say you decide not to spec into this, and you weren't a Void Weaver, our dots would be 50% less. and they already tick for no damage on the beta. Kind of scares me to think about the base damage of our dots and why I think they need to be buffed, because a 50% buff barely increases our damage. So that's a little scary for me, but it's okay. Let me go ahead and spec out of some things. Sorry, I had to hit the back thing. Uh-oh. Let me go ahead and spec all of these. That's my bad. Before we go into... I could just hit the refresh all thing. That would have been faster, right? It's okay. It's not a big deal. We'll go over all that later. All right. We're good. All right. Anyways. I like to go 1 point in Dark Evangelism here. It buffs your Mind Flay, it buffs your Void Torrent, and it buffs your dots. What is this ability? Anytime you Mind Spike, Mind Flay, or Void Torrent, you gain a stack up to 5. With 1 Dark Evangelism stack, you get 1% increased damage. And then with 2 stacks, you'd get 2% per stack. So either 5% or 10% max. I like to go 1 in here because it buffs Mind Flay and it buffs Void Torrent. So I can just do more of that, and then I get to get 1 in Mental Decay. So my Mind Flay gets 15% increased, and my Void Torrent gets 5% increased, while my dots get 5% increased. So since Mind Flay is more priority over Void Torrent, it's more important to get 1 in Mental Decay instead of 2 in Dark Evangelism. In case you were wondering why I don't go 2 and buff 10%, 10%, because I can get 15% and 5% when my main damage is Surge of Insanity. You want it to hit harder, but you also want your dots to have value, and you want to buff any other damage. So 1 in here, 1 in here, I think is the best way to go with that. You could go either way, but I think it's best to go with that, so all your damage gets buffed. Okay, so like I was saying, Death does no damage. Shadow or Death does no damage. Maybe 1 to 2%. It's the weakest execute in the game by like 300, 400, 500%. So I prefer to not spec into anything revolving death. So instead, I go to my Auspicious Spirits. What does Auspicious Spirits do? It increases our apparitions by 15%, but it also makes them generate insanity. So this is just great because the more insanity we get means the more Devouring Plagues we get, which means the more Mind Flays we get. And that's all correlates to each other because it all buffs each other. So this is why we like having small things like that to increase. Okay? Then we're going to go over here and spec into Void Torrent. Void Torrent generates insanity over time, and it does a decent amount of damage on both the pre-patch and beta. Not a lot, about 1 million, which could be a lot, don't get me wrong. But it's like around 800,000 realistically. But it generates insanity, and with this tree, going down to Malediction, going down to Out of Cthulhu, it summons these tendrils that generate insanity, but also apply a slow to them. Right? The Mind Flay on a target does 94,000 over 15 seconds. This is now 10 seconds on beta, so this will be changed tomorrow. But it also slows the target and generates us insanity. So this is great for us because it's just another insanity builder. And so, oh, my wife's home. And so that's why we spec into this. And then Malediction just reduces it by 30%. Or by 15 seconds, sorry. It makes it down to 30 seconds. But yeah, so give me a second and we'll continue this. I'm going to say hi to my wife. All right, we're back. All right, so last thing I was going over was the Cthulhu's. And on beta, based on the build, I've gone over I have a guide for beta. You can spec into some other things, but this is just a general beginner's guide. So it should be for what's easiest for everyone to start running with if you're a beginner. There goes my baby. Next, we're going to go over what Insidious Ire is and when are the times you could use it. At the moment, especially on beta, the Void Torrent isn't our main damage and doesn't do as much damage as we hope. But what Ire does is when you spec into it 2 times, it increases the damage of your Void Torrent when you have a Devouring Plague and your Mind Blast by 40%. Now, this was so OP when it first came out. It used to be your main damage. You would one-shot people with Void Torrent, and then over the course of the gear and everything, it got weaker. So it's just not a priority spell. Not to mention, everyone has it ingrained in their head to kick Void Torrent and to kick Mind Games and to kick Vampiric Touch. Those 3 spells in their head are like kick abilities. So when you use this ability, you generally get stopped. So there's just a lot of reasons why this isn't as valuable as it looks. Mainly because it just as well doesn't do as much damage. Okay. Now that being said, let's go over here to what I love. Right here, Screams of the Void. What is Screams of the Void? This increases your dot ticks by 80% on all targets for 3 seconds when you use Devouring Plague. It does not increase the Devouring Plague itself, though. It does Pain and Vampiric Touch. But this has a huge correlation to making insanity ticks, right? And then getting procs of your Shadowy Insight, and so forth, right? It also has the ability to proc any enchants you have. So weapon enchants, it has a chance to proc your trinkets, because every time you do damage, these abilities or enchants have a chance to proc. So this is why Screams of the Void in general is just good. It has a chance to proc all your abilities, especially when you're about to spec into what's next, called Tormented Spirits. Tormented Spirits has a 6% chance to summon a apparition when it does damage. So if you do Screams of the Void, you Devouring Plague, 3 seconds, 80% faster ticks, you have a chance to spawn one, and then you could do it again, and then spawn and have another 80% chance or 80% tick rate for a chance to proc more. This just means you have more pad damage without casting, right? It just has a chance at any time to spawn apparitions on your targets. Great for padding those meters. This is good for pre-patch. I have some builds for beta that on my last guide, if you guys want to check that video out after this one. But if you're going off the pre-patch build that I'm currently running, these are the things that I generally run. Sometimes, as you see here, I have Yogg. Sometimes I go Idol over Yogg. Majority of the time I would say I go Idol over Yogg. But on the pre-patch, I also don't run Mental Decay as often, because I like just having a pad build with Yogg Saran, because Yogg hits a lot on pre-patch. It's not the ideal build, just for the simple fact that it's pre-patch. Everything hits hard. So I would recommend going something like this to get used to running either N'Zoth or Mindbender for beta. Because on beta, Mindbender and Mastermind, which I'll go over in a second, are really good. But we're going to continue on what I think is viable. So N'Zoth summons you summon a thing from beyond after you get 25 stacks of apparitions. So every Mind Blast summons an apparition. It's not every apparition you summon, it's every implication. So if you have 10 targets dotted, Mind Blast, and it summons 10 apparitions, it only counts as 1. Right? So for every application you summon of apparition, you get a stack. At 25 stacks, you get this thing from beyond that starts shooting people from range, and it's AoE, and it does some good pad damage. So Tormented Spirits is very good interaction with Yogg, because every time this randomly procs, it gives you a stack also, right? But I would say on pre-patch is good, especially for Battleground Blitz. But I think N'Zoth, which is what we're going to go over next, is better for both pre-patch and beta over Yogg, because this just stacks when your Vampiric Touch or Devouring Plague does damage. It stacks this Idol N'Zoth that can't be dispelled, by the way. It's not dispellable. And every time your dots tick, it has a chance to collapse it, doing AoE damage forever until those stacks run out. Cool thing about these stacks, a little tip, is that they can restack as they're exploding. So if they go, 10 stacks, 9 stacks, 8 stacks, it can go 8 stacks, 9 stacks, 8 stacks, 9 stacks, 10 stacks, 8 stacks. It can keep going like that. As long it can just proc and keep making those collapsings happen. And it will keep going until it's completely out of those stacks. So, and it can stack on multiple enemies too, is the thing. Multiple enemies can stack and hit each other. So it's really cool. And if, let's say, if somebody's LOSing and their healer's trying to drink and it hits their healer, it'll stand them up for a second. So that's also really cool. Now, that being said, this is what I prefer as a pre-patch build. And then Mindbender. Mindbender summons your Shadow Fiend to make it to from a 3-minute cooldown to a 1-minute cooldown, and makes it generate insanity, and it does more damage every time it attacks. And it also teleports at people for some random reason. Escapable Torpor is supposed to make him teleport, but I've seen my Mindbender do some weird crap, and maybe it's just the animation, I don't know. But it's pretty cool how this thing works in general. Just floating little Mindbender running at people, hitting them. Still really nice to have. At a 1-minute cooldown. Free insanity generator without casting, essentially, is all you gotta think about. So I prefer to run Mindbender on the beta, going down to Mastermind, which Mastermind gives you a high crit damage. Let's just click on this real quick and show you guys what this is. So on the beta, I like to run Mastermind because this increases your critical strike chance with your Mind Spike, Mind Flay, and Mind Blast and Death by 8% and 40% increased crit damage. Like I said, crit damage isn't a lot for Shadow Priest, but your Mind Flay is your main damage. So I like to do some random specking around stuff on the beta, and I drop Malediction and Idle Cthulhu sometimes, and I spec myself into Ancient Madness and sometimes N'Zoth, or sometimes I just go something like this. Like, I could put this anywhere, right? Just because it does an insane amount of damage. You can even put it here for more Mind Flay. This is a big Mind Flay build, right? You get your Void Torrent still just for Insanity and a 30-second go, but then you have huge chance to crit with Ancient Madness for your Mind Flays, and it's just buffed. And if it crits, oh boy, those Mind Flays can crit for like 300k, guys, on a per tick, right? 300k per tick on the beta. That's a lot of damage. So you could do things like that on beta, but like I said, we're gonna try to focus more on pre-patch than anything else. But tomorrow, like I said, we're gonna get all these things buffed, the new changes to malediction or manipulation and stuff. So it'll be fun to mess around with some of that. All right, that's essentially the priest tree. Now we're gonna go over spells that we don't use, but what they do. So Mind Devourer has a chance to when you Mind Blast, has a chance to cause your next Devouring Plague to cost 0 insanity and do extra damage. We don't really Mind Blast to Mind Blast, right? Especially for Mind Devourer. And then in order to go down to Mind Devourer, you have to go 1 in Ancient Madness and then 2 in Mind Devourer. So that's 3 wasted points. And that's the reason why we don't go down here, guys. If you're ever wondering why we don't go to this ability, it's great. I actually love this ability. But if you swap this with Ancient Madness and then made it 1 point, oh man, this would be a priority pick every time. This would just be really nice to have. But since it's under Ancient Madness and there's no way to get to it, and it's 3 points, it's not worth the 3 points you would lose. Alright? It's just not worth 3 points you would lose. That's why we don't go down to it. Like I said, Death Speaker does no damage. Inescapable Torment used to be really good before the nerf to Idol of Ejrsp. And what this does is every time you would Death, it would make your Mindbender teleport behind the target and do AoE damage. Well, they nerfed this by a lot, and they nerfed the Idol by a lot. And the Idol, this is very hard to explain into, but essentially based on when you summon your Mindbender, you would get a benefit. So if you used the Mindbender when someone was at high HP, you would do 5% more damage. If you did it when they were stunned, you would get Insanity. If you did it when they were feared, it wouldn't break the fear. So what a lot of people would do would run in at high health targets and fear them, and then summon the Mindbender to get the increased damage, and your fear wouldn't break, and then you would just burst people in a fear. That's essentially what Ejrsp would do. It had 4 different abilities you could use, and if you paired it right, it would do a huge amount of damage, and you would just destroy people with Death Speaker procs and just spamming Death and Mind Blast. But that got nerfed, and that's why you don't see people use it anymore. Just if you guys are wondering. So that's the Shadow Priest tree, alright? That's the breakdown, why we use it, what they all do, what the spells are for. I guess we could go over Mind Melt real quick and Pathogen. Mind Melt increases your critical strike chance of Mind Blast every time you Mind Spike. This is on the beta, which is coming, the things will change tomorrow, will be 3 stacks for 30%. So it'd make your Mind Blast a 90% crit chance after you did 3 Mind Spikes. We don't use Mind Spike, and Mind Blast does almost no damage, and Void Blast does almost no damage. So this, if Void Blast was stronger, it would be nice, but then you'd still have to spec Mind Spike, and Mind Flay Insanity is just better. So it's really hard to justify going into Mind Melt. Like I said, you could go down this tree for a cheesy one-shot, but I'm not trying to make you newer Shadow Priests play cheesy builds, because they're cheesy for a reason. They don't have a high return rate. You're going to lose more than you're going to win with these builds that you might see some cheesy people doing. And you're like, well, this guy ran this and he one-shot me. Sure. How often does that happen? Not a lot, which is why people don't run it. If you see a high-rated Shadow Priest and they don't generally run those builds, It's because they don't have a high return rate. So these are more fun builds that you could run. But that's that. And then Phantasm Pathogen was really good last season if you spec'd it 1 or 2 maybe, depending on your build, because it would, after your 4 set, when you do your 4 set, you'd get the buff and increase your apparition damage on the target. Well, this would buff that, right? It would buff your apparitions even more. But now that apparitions isn't our main form of damage, and we're not trying to go as Patty, we're trying to buff our Mind Flays. We don't really spec into this anymore, just because our apparitions are no longer our main form of damage. They're just the Patty. So that's what this would be for. If we ever run into an apparition build again, or apparition season, then we run this right here, guys. Lots of on-hit damage if apparitions hit for a lot. So keep that in mind. So that's the rest of the build. Why we run things, why we don't. Let's go over to our priest side. We're just going to reset it again. If I can go over priest. And we're going to run through this one a little bit faster because it's just the priest side. So we take the spell magic. The spell magic is taking beneficial effects off people. So shields, buffs, anything of that nature that we're able to dispel. That's our main way of controlling people. Improved flash heal. Gotta take it. Increases our off healing. Granted, our healing isn't the best, but it'd be worse. So we take this. Purify Disease. We almost never take. The reason is, it's a wasted point. We don't have a lot of points to spare on the priest side, but also there's not a lot of diseases that matter. You could take this into other Shadow Priests if you really, really wanted to, and dispel their Devouring Plagues. But they get, with the current state of Shadow Priest, Devouring Plagues are up a lot, and you have to remember to use it. And as a newer Shadow Priest out there, you might not remember to use it. This also could be really good into Death Knights next season, especially on Holy, because a lot of damage does come from their dots. So at any point you just remember to use it, it can come in handy. I still don't know if we'll spec into it because of how many points we need on the priest side, but it is a niche scenario where you could take it versus just DKs, and that's about it. But as of now, we don't really take it. Alright, so we have 2 options here. Tremble and play Psychic Scream, or Psychic Voice. In PvP, you generally want to create distance with your screams, but also, generally when you're CCing people, if they're standing still, you're going to break that fear with your damage even faster than you would already. So you want to go Psychic Voice for the reduced cooldown of your fear, so you have more fears up for more CC, and since Shadow Priest is support-based and CC-based, that's the better option, okay? Phantasm, what this does is makes your Fade ability remove all snares. If you guys don't know what snares are, they are slows. Anything that slows you is a snare. Alright? Next up over here, you can either go Protective Light or From Darkness Comes Light. Tomorrow this gets buffed for 2% per stack up to, what is it? Is it 2% per stack? Up to 30 stacks? It's 60, yeah. It's 2% per stack up to 30 stacks because it's 60% increased damage, or increased healing. So this gets buffed tomorrow, so you heal more and faster. Could be really good on the pre-patch because you heal more on pre-patch than you do on beta. I'll probably still go Protective Light because it's just a 10% wall every time you heal yourself. So if you do a pre-go, which we'll go over what that is in a little bit, you can get a lot of damage reduction, and I'll go over why this is good later. Angelic Feather is a must. This gives you 3 charges of sprints on a 20-second cooldown for 40% increased movement. As a class that has any kind of mobility, this is a must-have. And it costs no mana, so you don't have to worry about spamming anything for it. You just use it when you need to get away or you're going to try to land a fear, right? A good correlation with this is using your Fade to remove all slows and then feathering towards somebody, so you get a sprint and a removal, and you guarantee your fears on the healer or whoever you need to use it on. So keep that in mind. Fade with feather, great combination. Okay. Next thing we have to go down is Leap of Faith. Leap of Faith is the ability that when you grip somebody, you might hear somebody say "grip me" in streams you might watch, or people might tell you to grip them. That's what Leap of Faith is. It's the little angel grip that brings people to you, and you can save people from like pre-gripping a smoke bomb or however, right? Like they get kidneyed, your healer gets kidneyed or strangulated or whatever. You grip them, so they have to waste a grip charge, or they have to use mobility to get back to your healer, or whatever it needs to be. This is just a great talent, makes us very versatile, very support class based ability. Shackle Undead, I can't remember the last time I actually used this, to be honest with you, because it's a talent. It's a talent we have to spec into, and it's not a lot of times you're going to use this outside of a Death Knight. And even then, Death Knight hadn't had A-Bomb all season, all expansion. And so you'd only use this normally to shackle A-Bomb or shackle Gargoyles or things of that nature. But they don't seem to do that much damage, even on the beta. So I don't know if we even take this on the beta outside of maybe shackling a pet to stop a kick. But even then, you would use 2 talents for DKs, and I don't see myself doing that, honestly. It doesn't do enough to justify outside of maybe just the Purify Disease. But you could just play just to slow the game down if you really, really wanted to. If there's no other options and you're continuously losing to Death Knight Cleaves, just try it out. But that's all Shackle Undead does. It just makes the undead target not able to move or attack, and it just sits there. So it used to be really good, and I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. I just don't see anybody personally using this anymore. Between the two of these, Void Tendrils and Sheer Terror, I'm really annoyed that Sheer Terror just isn't baseline. It makes our damage of our fear to break even higher, and they already buffed fears by 100% of being broken or whatever it was. Now this buffs it by another 75%, and what's crazy is without this, our fears still break almost instantly, even though they increase the threshold earlier on in Dragonflight. I love Void Tendrils so much. I wish I could use this more often. It's just very hard to play the comps that we play without Sheer Terror, because our dots and our teammates just break our fears. It's unfortunate, but man, I've done some crazy things with Void Tendrils, guys. Mind controlling healers behind pillars, using a Void Tendril on them. If you guys didn't know, Void Tendril is not dispellable. It has to be killed. It has a health bar. So DPS will use it and kill it fairly easily. But healers have a harder time to kill this. So you could MC or fear healers behind a pillar, Void Tendril them, run around the pillar, kill the kill target. They're sitting there behind the pillar trying to kill the Void Tendril, and then they come around, you stun and silence them. You get to extend your CC chain. And yeah, man, I wish I could use this more, and it's still viable. You could still do that, guys, especially in solo shuffle when people aren't paying attention. So keep that in mind. It is a tip you could use. Fear or mind control a healer behind the pillar, stun them if you wish, Void Tendril them, run back out, do damage. Once they're out of the Void Tendril, silence them. Right? Something of that nature could be really good. But unfortunately, for the most part, we do have to spec Sheer Terror, because our fear is a huge component of our CC chain and the way we get our damage to stick. So Sheer Terror is the 80% go value, okay? Going over to Mind Control, I almost always spec Mind Control. There are situations where I don't spec Mind Control, which I'll go over at the very end of all the build, which I had in my guide from my last video, but I'll go over it briefly at the end of this video. Essentially all Mind Control does, you spam it and you take control of the person's character. Can't use any spells or anything of that nature, but you can move them away, so you can jump them off. Let's say on Mungambala, you can jump them off the side. If they're in the darkness, you can get them out of darkness, and things of that nature, right? So, or just to peel, just to mind control them to create distance, right? Let's say you're playing with a Warlock, you have people running at your Warlock, you MC a melee off of them, make the Warlock move one direction, make the MC person move the other direction, boom, you created 20-30 yards, right? So I love running mind control. Very rarely do I not run it. All right, next tree, Mass Spell. Gotta take it, even though it got nerfed. But Mass Spell, all it is AoE, boom, and what it does is dispels all the magical effects on anyone that it's on your team especially. But for offensive, it dispels ice blocks, it dispels magic bop from paladins, and it dispels bubble from paladins. So the immunities that you could do with it are just so good, especially into things like Cupid, Cupid, Scooby-Doo Cleave, anything with a Holy Pally or Red Pally. This is inviolable. You have to have it. Now, going over to Move with Grace, you should spec Move with Grace a lot if you're not the kill target, guys, because it reduces your Leap of Faith cooldown to about a minute, and so that way you can grip people more often, especially if they go your healer or your warlock or your feral druid or whoever you're playing with that they don't go you. Or if you're going into anything with a hunter, right? You can grip traps a lot more, right? On a 30-second faster cooldown, stops a lot of trap goes, keeps you living. So Move with Grace is very good for that because it just makes your Leap of Faith a lower cooldown. Power Infusion, as you know, increases our haste, but also you can spec into Twins of the Sun Priestess, which increases their haste as well. So this ability right here gives both the target you are looking at or macro to Power Infusion or PI, and this just gives you so much damage to anything that has a haste damage profile, which is just about everyone. All right. Over here you have Sanduin Teaching, which gives Leech. Leech is almost nothing in PvP. It does no healing, so we go with Vampiric Embrace. This increases your healing by increases your healing available when you pop it, right? So when you pop it, all your single target damage does 50% healing to a nearby ally for 12 seconds. Spec into Sandaline, and it reduces the cooldown and increases its healing done. So you get to a lot of healing with this. This is your major recovery outside of Dispersion ability, right? If you can pop this during a go or a counter go, you can keep yourself alive while your healer CC'd with all your damage reductions. So very good to pop this ability to keep your team alive, especially if you have damage. Okay. Next up, let's go look over at Apathy. We do not run Apathy. This says Mind Blast crits reduces the target's movement speed. We have very low crit, and Mind Blast is not a priority ability, so we're almost never gonna ever think about this spell ever. All right, so don't even worry about this. Same thing with Void Shield. Your damage, when you cast on yourself, damage refills your Power Word Shield. Power Word Shield, especially on the beta, is like 1% of our health, maybe like 4%. It's like 300,000 on 7 million HP pools on the beta. That's insane to me to think about. After it was buffed too. Remember when it got buffed on the beta by like 20% or whatever? It's still only 300,000 on 7 million. Our powered shields are garbage. Worst thing I've ever seen a powered shield for any shield when other shields are almost 1 million plus. So it is what it is. Just never spec into this. All right. Let's go down real quick to Throws of Pain. Throws of Pain times 2. Increases their Shadow or Pain damage, and then you gain Insanity if something dies. The second part, really good for PvE or leveling. But the first part, great for PvP. All right. All it does is a damage bonus. Gotta take it. All right. Let's go up here. Mental Agility. I generally lock Mental Agility in as a baseline, and then spec out of things based on what I'm queuing into. All right. Well, baseline reduces Massive Spells mana cost by 50%, and it reduces your Dispel Magic by 10%. So when you're spamming Druids or Evokers from their their Life Blooms or their Reversions or whatever you may have, you get more of them off. So you gotta spec into a baseline. You don't have to have it though based on what you're queuing into. So keep that in mind. Body and Soul is something you can spec into if you wish, outside of Move with Grace if you're not the target, or if you need to get CC off or whatever. Sometimes I just interchange these two talents just so I have an additional sprint whenever I'm going somewhere. Don't have to spec into it if you don't want to. It does cost mana because you have to use Powered Shield for it to get the increased movement speed. But you could spec into it if you wish to. Again, you do not have to. Twist of Fate. This is really good for burst. Anytime we do damage below a 35% health target, we gain 10% damage and healing. Really good for recovery. Also really good for increasing our burst damage right before you do a finisher. So gotta take Twist of Fate. Just a baseline passive for when we're doing damage. Alright, now we're gonna go into this next form of tree. So we're gonna go all three of these, okay? Reason you can go Divine Star or Halo. Doesn't matter anymore for this next one. Halo is a must on beta if you're playing Archon, because the whole build revolves around it. And then Divine Star doesn't matter at all. You're almost never going to hit this ability unless you're trying to get someone out of stealth, or maybe you're just behind a pillar to get Insanity. But if they just nerfed this where you have to be in combat to get the Insanity from Divine Star. So essentially, you're always going to pretty much spec Halo just for the simple fact that you're never pressing Divine Star anyways, or you're spec'd into Archon, right? So, do what you will. Next is Translucent Image. This is another wall, right? And if you guys don't know what a wall is just a term that we use for anything that reduces damage done to you. So, Fade reduces 10% damage taken. It's a 10% wall, all right? Next up, Cauterizing Shadows. The only reason we're taking Cauterizing Shadows, even though it's garbage healing, is to get down to Manipulation. And so speaking of, we're going to go into Manipulation. But Cauterizing Shadows, what it does is when your Shadow Red Paint expires or you refresh it when there's less than 5 seconds, you heal yourself. It's okay for PvE. It does like 1% healing, like throughout your entire healing profile, so it's really bad. This needs like a 400% buff to be viable in PvP or even PvE. It's terrible in PvE apparently. So that is what that is. All right, Manipulation. This is changing tomorrow to a 1-point talent for the same effect. So this will go from a 2-point talent to a 1-point talent, and it'll still do 2% less damage. So it's a 2% wall. So are you guys recognizing all the walls we're getting and why I choose this spec? I do go over this in my previous guide, but this is really good for living. Everything that reduces damage as a Shadow Priest is a benefit to us to win the game. Because a Shadow Priest in the end game is dangerous, guys. So that's why I like Manipulation. And then, actually what we're going to do is we're only going to spec one talent in this just to kind of give you guys a profile. Once I go over everything, I'll tell you guys what I'm going to go into. So Phantom Reach is really good if you're playing on big maps like Mukambala, Tolvaron Arena, things of that nature, even the Grand, because you can hit healers from who are trying to sit far back with increasing your range. Now, this is only needed if you're not the target, one, or it's a map that you just can't hit the healer. You can't reach them because there's like a Destro lock and a Frost Mage, so you need that increased range. Outside of that, if you're the target, they're on you, right? Those your kill targets, anything that you're hitting is on you. So wherever you go, you put the positioning down. You set the pace. So you still don't need this, right? The healer should be within 40 yards, and the DPS should be within 40 yards. So there's no reason to have increased range if you're the target. So you don't need to spec into this. So Phantom Reach, good for long maps. When you're not the target, you spec into it. When you are the target, you don't spec into it. Just keep that. That's how all you got to think about. Don't overthink it. All right. And then Improved Fade needs 2 talents. Why do we do this? It reduces the cooldown of Fade, so you get your wall up faster, and the PvP talent, which we'll go into later. Also, you then go down into Void Shift. Okay. So Void Shift is life swap, right? When somebody's like, swap me, swap me, swap me. That's what they're talking about. It's Void Shift. You swap health, whatever you're at, to them, and they take your health, and you go to 25%. If they're below that threshold, right? Like if you swap them at 5%, you'll go to like 25%, and then they'll take your health, especially if you're at full health. Really good for any situation in PvP. It's a must. Essence Devour is good for duels and world stuff. So like when you're leveling, you don't need Void Shift, so you can just swap into Essence Devour. I will make a leveling guide for the War Within since it comes out in a little over a week and a half from now, right? So, actually, no, it's 2 weeks, right? It's 26 for most people, 23rd. I have early access, so week and a half for me. Either way, that's all that is. Never spec into Crystalline Reflection as a Shadow Priest. The healing's garbage, and your shields break instantly. The damage returned back to them doesn't do anything because your shields are so small. Never need to spec into this ever. All right? So now we're moving all the way over here. Light's Inspiration is a must. 2 talents, gotta get it. However, whichever way you want to go down getting to this, gotta get it. This makes your Desperate Prayer a 40% heal and a 40% increased health pool. If you can do pre-Desperate Prayers on like Rogue Mage Goes, or Draco Cleave, which is, sorry, I have hiccups, which is Devastation Evoker, or Death Knight, right? you can live. You get a 40% increased heal. If you get your walls off, you should live to go without having to waste dispersion, which is your main cooldown, right? Or life swap. If you're smart about it, you'll live. So you got to get this. Now, I personally love going Power Word Life. I can't tell you how many times I watched my rank 1 video I put out. I would have not got rank 1 without this ability. I had like 4 or 5 rounds guaranteed I won at like 3% HP because I got a Power Word Life off, lived, and killed whoever else targeting. And I can't even, I die by this ability. I love it. I love Power Word Life over Benevolence. You can go Benevolence to increase all your healing. I feel like our healing's so fucking small, it doesn't matter. But having that Power Word Life on beta, it heals for 1 to 2 million. On 7 million, that's a lot, right? On a 15-second cooldown. So I love it. And you can use it on teammates. So if they're about to die, you can flash heal them into a Power Word Life or a Power Word Life into a heal. So I personally just think it's a great ability. That's why I like it so much. But you could go Benevolence. I just like it. Let's say you don't want to go any one of these. Go Bulwark, right? Bulwark, it gives you 15% shield, 15% health shield when you get dropped below 30%. It's really good for bursting comps. And what I was trying to say here is this is what I would run to live versus like RMPs and stuff. That situation, you don't need Phantom Reach. Manipulation becomes a 1-point talent, so you get that extra point. Put it into Bulwark. Get a shield, get a heal, right? So now we're going to go into situations of when I swap my specs, okay? So let's say we are playing on tomorrow when all the new talents come in. I drop, we get the 1 point here. I will drop Mind Control, and I will drop Mental Agility, if I need to spec into this build here. This is the most tanky build we have when it comes to fighting other casters or anything with magic, all right? And I'm going to explain real quick. So going down to here, you get something called Spell Warding or Blessed Recovery. Spell Warding gives you a flat 3% magic damage reduction. This is good into any casters. This is good into Rep Pallies, because Rep Pallies is mostly holy damage, or what's called, or is it Benevolence damage? Radiant damage? It's still magic. Whatever it's called, it's magic. So you can do a lot of their damage you can absorb and have a wall too. Demon Hunters are chaos damage, which is magic, with some physical obviously, but a lot of their damage is magic. Death Knights are all magic, right? So you can run into Death Knights to have that reduction. And then again, like I said, all the different casters are magic. So 3% wall, 2% wall, 10% wall, 10% wall, shield, and heal, right? If you play it smart, you can keep yourself alive during goes with using these. And this is a general rule of thumb that I will do when I know I'm gonna get bursted, right? I see my healers getting CC'd, throw a flash heal, throw a fade on the go, and then I have a 10% wall. Oh, wait, am I not expecting to flash heal? Hold on. Oh, I guess I wasn't expecting to flash heal. Hold on, let me change this real quick. I was wondering why my flash heal wasn't up. Okay, so when I get my flash heal up, like I said, I'll see the goes coming, I'll flash heal, I'll fade. So now I have a 10% wall, a 10% wall, right? And then I have my 2% wall down here and my 3% wall down here. That's a lot of damage reduction. Plus, I'll have a shield with this being 1. So I can get the 15% shield, come out of that, Desperate Prayer, right? Desperate Prayer, heal myself, and then get a Powered Life off. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to save myself from dying until my healer is out of CC running this exact build. Because it's just tanky, right? It's just a tanky build. Now, if you're running into melee, you want to run something called Blessed Recovery. Blessed Recovery, you run into melee with things that are based off of critical strike chance. So anything with a Fury Warrior, a Windwalker, you can do it with a Subtlety Rogue or Outlaw Rogue. You can also run Spell Warding into Sub-Rogues because their Shadow Blades burst is shadow damage. So you could do either one of these, but I generally run Spell Warding because the Mage on the team also, or the Boomkin, so it's just more nullification damage. But this will heal you when you're crit by 20% of the crit over 6 seconds. This will heal for a lot. With this build, you'll heal for a lot with all the walls. You generally just want to live, guys. Like I said, you want to live as a Shadow Priest, because if you don't end up dying to goes, you win in the late game. A lot of the time, it's a Shadow Priest and the comps that you play. As long as you don't die when you're the target, you'll win. So just, well, duh, but you know what I mean. And a lot of time, if I'm the target in these builds, I do drop Mind Control, and I'll either run Low Grip or I'll run Mental Agility, right? Dispelling gives you Insanity, right? And then you get more of them. And you're not going to be Mind Controlling when you're the target most of the time. So keep that in mind also. A lot of your builds will change based on what you're fighting. But my baseline, when I'm targeted build, is something of this nature with either Move with Grace, Body and Soul, or Dispel. Alright? That's that for you guys. All these other abilities are almost useless in any regard, guys. We're not using them at the moment. There's no reason to really go over them. You could go down this route if you want to, instead of going through the Halo Divine Star route. But you have, in the beta, you're pretty much going Halo anyways if you're Archon, so there's no reason to go down the lower Angel's Mercy route, which reduces your Desperate Prayer. So there's really no reason. But you could go down here to get Angel's Mercy if you're running Archon, right? Instead of going down the Powered Life tree if you don't want Powered Life. But then you have to take other talents out. Like if you're trying to do your baseline defense build like I'm doing here, then you're like, oh, well, how am I going to go my baseline defense route with having to spec into all this different stuff? It just makes it harder. So I just recommend going down this tree, which I'm just going to spec into Halo for good measures. All right, now we're going to go ahead and go over our PvP talents. And like I said, I told you guys, it'll be a long video, but I want you guys to have all the knowledge, especially as a new Shadow Priest. This is meant to be a guide for the newer Shadow Priest who might not have all the ins and outs or explanations of why we spec into these talents, guys. All right, and there are plenty of builds you can run because we are diverse. There are also preferences. Like I have a preference, right? I have the preference of running some patty defensive builds instead of going straight offensive because that's how I survive. All right, so next, let's go ahead and go into the PvP talents. PvP talents baseline. Siphene. What is Siphene? Siphene does 1% damage and gives a 50% MS or Mortal Strike, which is reduced healing, on the target. How do we use this ability, guys? We use Siphene at the end of CC chains. All right. Sometimes you can use it as a distraction to save your life, and that's niche, but it does work. Well, generally what you do is you stun, you fear, you silence a healer, and then you, outside of your CC chain with your team on your go, you throw the Siphene out right at the end of the CC chain. Not when they're out of CC, right before. Because then when they use their panic heal, like NS from Resto Druids or NS from Resto Shamans, or Lay on Hands from Paladins, right? Or what other big heals do we have out there that I'm just blanking on? Evokers have their what's it called ability, and trying to think of outside big heals because you have monks have Cocoon, Revival, but they're not like big burst heals. What am I missing? Anyways, you get the point. You use it at the end to stop healing because some people just have a lot of overtime healing, right? And like you'll absorb healing tides, you'll absorb holy shocks from like daybreaks, you'll absorb all these different things that they then have to target to kill. It also is a really good distraction for your teammates. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you're playing Shadow Play or God Comp, and they are running down your mage or warlock. If it's a melee, they have to run to you to stop Siphene, right? Well, if they're off of you, they have to waste either mobility to get to you or mobility to get back to your teammate, and that's where your grip comes in handy, right? So if they're going at your teammate and you Siphene, their instinct, because they're Mongos and they have these giant weak auras that say kill Siphene. Those Mongos aren't really thinking kill Siphene. They just say see kill Siphene 99% of the time. These players have these weak auras and they'll just run to the Siphene because they're not thinking, oh, I can just kill. I've had people at 25, 26, 2700 and threes on the kill potential stop the kill to kill a fucking Siphene, guys. They just turn around and kill a fucking Siphene. Well, they could have just killed my teammate. So it's just ingrained in people's head to kill Siphene. It's like sometimes you can just throw it out there, they'll run at it to kill it, and then run back to your teammate, and you kept your teammate alive. So that's a little tip and trick for you there. Or if they're on you and they're about to kill you, throw a Scythe out, cast damage, right? Let's say you're really trying to get your damage out. You can literally Scythe and then cast your damage. They'll kill the Scythe and then you'll get your damage out because they're trying to kill Scythe, right? So that's another big one you can do to juke people out is throw your Scythe out and then cast your Void Eruption or your Dark Ascension or your Void Torrent, right? And that they'll just run at it and try to kill it. So that's another one to keep in mind too. Phase shift. Phase shift is very important. Why is it very important? It's a damage reductor for your fade, but also you can use it to dodge CC. Let's say you're sitting here and then you see a Cyclone. Boom, fade the Cyclone. A Chaos Bolt's about to go off. Boom, fade the Chaos Bolt right before it goes off so it misses you. A Glacial Spike's about to go off. Boom, you dodge the Glacial Spike, right? It's very good to use to keep yourself alive, right? You can fade, dodge the attacks, not worry about dying. Things of that nature. So keep that in mind. It's also, again, it gives you a wall. All right, next up on that, Catharsis. Catharsis is when you take damage, you get that stacking debuff, or sorry, that stacking buff, and you hit people really hard, right? And it can crit. So you can absorb damage. There's no internal cooldown. You just, when it's full, you send it, and you get to do a lot of passive damage with it if you're being hit. If you're the target, or if they're playing against like a rock comp, like with an Affylock, you'll always have it up. When it's full or close to full, I think it's like 80% is what it does. Your Shadow Word Pain will actually glow. All right, guys. So if you need a weak aura, sure. If you need the Tell Me When, sure. I don't use any of that. I use my peripheral vision, and when my Shadow Word Pain is glowing, I know it's ready to send. So your Shadow Word Pain will glow at that point. That's really cool. Now, when to swap. When you're the kill target and you're not going to get value out of Siphene, you can drop Siphene for either Driven to Madness. I'm in that combat bug. So you can either drop for Driven to Madness, which will reset the cooldown of your Void Form or Dark Ascension for 3 seconds every time you're hit. So there's no cooldown on this. Just when you get hit, it'll go down. Really good to have. If you're a target and you'll get no value out of Siphene, or if you have an MS on your team and you don't really get that value out of Siphene, you can go Driven to Madness. You can also go Mind Games if you wish. I don't recommend Mind Games. If you're going to run Mind Games, you're better off just running Siphene. Mind Games is weak, doesn't do that much damage, but you could do that. Or you could go Void Volley. Then you can do a setup like this. This is when you are the target, by the way. Okay? So when you're not the target, you can drop Catharsis, and this is if you're not the target and not taking damage. Like if you're against a melee cleave who's never going you, then you can drop Catharsis for Mind Games. Whoops. I didn't even know you could do that anymore. You could drop Catharsis for Mind Games. So then it is valuable, because then you can do Mind Games and Siphene. Or you can do something like Mind Trauma if you're running Mind Spike, or if you're just spamming Surge of Insanities. Very low. I don't think you'd really take the trauma, but you could. Or you can go Improved MD for getting more, getting your heal out of CC more often, right? Because you don't need your Catharsis. You can also do things like Void Volley Siphene if you want to stack on the melee with them. Very niche. Again, I wouldn't really recommend it. The best things you're going to do are drop Catharsis for Mind Games, drop Catharsis for Driven to Madness if you're getting hit a little bit, but not enough for your Catharsis to hit hard, or to go Improved MD versus like Cupid Cleaves like Ret Hunter, Jungle like Feral Hunter, anything with a lot of CC, right? Like Boomkins who are spamming CC. But generally, when you're fighting a Boomkin, you're going to get hit. So, Catharsis is the way. That's pretty much the only time you're going to spec out of these builds, right, guys? Every now and then, if I know I need Siphene and I'm the target, I'll run Siphene and Void Volley, right? If it's a melee, for instance. If it's a melee and I know I'm going to get hit, but I need Siphene on my team in the Soul Shuffle to get the kill because I can cast even from the target, I will go this build. If I am playing against a Affylock and I don't really need my Greater Fade, my Phase Shift now is what it's called, sorry. Because Phase Shift doesn't get a lot of value into Affylock outside of maybe phase shifting things like the Soul Rock goes and stuff like that. But a lot of time you don't get value out of like a rock comp with phase shift. So I'll drop and I'll run Catharsis, I'll run Driven, and I'll run Siphene. So about every minute I have a big go, right? So keep that in mind for things that rot you. But generally you have this build, because generally these all come in handy and are needed. But as you can see, based on what you're queuing, what's your target, what normally hits you, you can spec out of these. And this, of course, will take a couple of rounds. You'll either run into a team that you'll notice will go your Warlock, will go your Feral, will go your Rogue, or won't go you. Or they will go you. So when you queue into them again and you see, oh, it's that team, you know then what to queue and what to spec into. Because, yeah, it's not just going to be instant. You're not just going to know, oh, this team should go Warlock, but they've been going me, right? Because you could pick a spec that generally this comp will go Warlock, right? And then they end up going you. And you're like, oh, crap, I'm spec wrong. Well, the next time you queue into that team, you know they're going you. So you spec right. So it's repetition to learn this kind of stuff, guys. But that's pretty much it for PvP talents and those kind of talents. Now we're going to go into gear. So for pre-patch, but also going into the War Within, it's the same thing. Haste and versatility are our best stats. Now, this is what you might hear a lot, all the time. Haste first, haste first. Why haste and why burst? That's where I'm going to kind of make something different here. The reason why we go into haste is not only because faster cast times. Yes, it does give us faster cast, which we need as the only caster, correct? But it also increases the rate of dots and how they tick, okay? So the more haste, if you notice, your damage goes up, but the time doesn't change on the duration. You might be wondering, how's that possible? Or maybe you haven't thought about how that's possible, but that's how haste works. It'll still be 100, let's say it's 140,000 over 21. It won't go 140,000 over 19. It'll go 160,000 over 21. That means you're getting more ticks, more dot damage, right? So based off haste, if you don't include intellect into this, right? Intellect will make your ticks hit harder, and that will make the damage go up. But if you're just going off pure haste, it's because you're getting an extra dot tick, okay? Haste has the chance to give your ticks more time to tick, essentially, right? So the more haste you have, instead of getting, let's just say 21 dot ticks over 21 seconds. Let's say they tick every second. Well, then you might get 22 dot ticks over 21 seconds, right? And that will increase the damage done. That's why haste is important. You get more ticks, faster casts, but it also gives you more damage. So it also affects your mind flays, right? Your mind flays will cast faster, but the same damage. Or sorry, they'll cast faster and do more damage, right? Because your channel is now faster, but you're also increasing the amount of damage you're doing in that small amount of frame. So they have to boost your damage, right? I feel like I'm explaining that a little off, but you get what I'm saying. The more haste, the faster your casts are, but you're doing that damage in a faster time period, so the damage is higher, right? It just makes it more front-loaded. That's the word I'm looking for. Your damage becomes more front-loaded because it's faster, right? And then your intellect buffs that. So you get more haste, you get more intellect, you get more verse. Verse increases your damage. Healing and damage taken is lower. But you get more verse and you get more haste. It makes your Mind Flame Insanities faster, and that damage is front-loaded because it's faster. So instead of doing, let's say you do, 1.4 seconds, you do 161,000 over 1.4, right? So now you do 161 damage over 1.2. So it's front-loaded, so that damage is faster, so it looks like it's hitting harder, right? Then you add intellect on top of that and versatility, and then that number goes higher. So it would be 165,000 over 1.2 seconds, right? Because the haste is making it tick faster, so that damage is front-loaded, right? So you don't have to worry about doing the great way to explain this is like a Mind Flay compared to a Mind Flay Insanity, right? Mind Flay is like 4 seconds. Mind Flay Insanity is 1.2. Let's say they're the same damage. Well, that same damage is now front-loaded into 1.2 seconds, so it's harder, it's burstier. And then you just add your versatility on top of that, which makes you do more damage, right? Because verse increases your damage taken. So haste increases your dot ticks, which gives you more damage to your dots, but then it also makes your channels faster, so they're more front-loaded. So I hope that explains that. I know it's a little tricky to understand. So like one increases damage, one increases the cast time of front-loaded damage. So you got to kind of think about that a little bit. You get the gist. But that's why we use haste. Haste for our dots, haste for our channels, faster channels, an extra dot tick for more damage. So that's how that works. But also, again, faster cast time, right? If we have to cast all the time, we need as fast as cast as we can do, guys. So that's why we go haste first. Now, mastery is a great stat. Don't get me wrong. I love the mastery. If you can spec into it as a secondary, that's what you need to choose over anything else. You could go crit. I don't think it's worth it. I think having more mastery and haste as your off stats, for instance, so you have a crit haste helm. If I could choose a crit or a haste mastery helm, I would choose that instead. Is what I'm getting at, because it takes a lot more crit to get value. Even though mastery takes a lot to get value, every 1% of mastery is 3% damage increase for Shadow Priest, because it's 1% per dot, which equals 3% more damage. So that's kind of my reasoning behind why, if I had to choose, I would choose a haste mastery piece over a haste crit piece. Okay, but yeah, that's why we choose haste first, guys. That's the importance of it. As for gear itself, I'll go over like actual beta gear and all that when we go. I will say I do lean more towards the 2 set, because in PvP combat, every Devouring Plague increases your damage by 1%, but then you lose all that burst. And it's like 8% burst you lose if you run the 4 set on beta. And you don't get that much burst out of your 4 set, right? You're not going to get 8% more burst, 8% more damage on your 4 set. Maybe the stats will give you some damage, sure. But a flat 8%, I'll take that, right? I'll take the flat 8%. I think 2 sets the way to go on the beta going into the War Within. I'll obviously do more testing and let you guys know on that, but that's what that is. All right, now we're going to move on to macros. All right, guys, macros. Macros I think you guys should all have. So for simplicity reasons, I put my power infusion into my burst, right? So if I'm going to pop my Void Eruption, I want to get into it as fast as possible, but it also means I'm bursting. So I generally PIA with my Void Eruption. Same thing, right? Same global, and I get to get into my Void form. Now I also put this into, since I'm PIing, and I have Twins of the Sun Priestess, I need to macro this into my teammate, right? Without just having to click them. So what you want to do is make a macro for your teammate. So as you can see, I have Bo Baggins in here, my buddy I was playing with, I guess recently. So I have /cast and then @Bo Baggins, right? And then Power Infusion. So this means when I cast my Void Eruption and Power Infusion, it's also going to give him Power Infusion because it's going to target him without me actually looking at him, right? So I can still target my kill target, but it'll give him the spell to give me the spell because I'm using Power Infusion. So great macro to have is something like this for your @teammate. In Soul Shuffle, I have something like this, right? I have all 3 people. Now, yes, you can get an add-on called Dynamic Macros. I don't like to use too many add-ons, personally. A lot of my add-ons are visual add-ons, just for me, like quartz, right? I like having quartz. I have Trophy GCD down here for my chat and for you guys. And then just some visual things, right? Like my classic floating text or my threat plates because I like my dots to look a certain way, right? Things like that. But I don't use too many actual add-ons, personally, other than my Tell Me When, which are my personal like weak auras I make to show like things like that I have on my bar. But I'm not tracking specific things. I'm tracking spells that I don't have to look at, right? I don't want to have to look down here to see if my Shadow or Death is ready or my Shadow Crash is ready. So I like to have that readily available. So this is that kind of macro for your, if you want to do Soul Shuffle or get dynamic macros. Next up are things like Feather. Cursor Feather you can use to send to a teammate. You can use this specific macro to either put over a teammate. I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Women, whoever's watching, I almost can never think of a situation where I actually feather a teammate. And I know that's like, oh, you could. I don't know anyone who has. I've talked to so many people, and most people are like, nah, dude, I don't ever feather people. I personally don't. I can't think of a time I do. So I use what's called the @player macro. So if you notice, right, if I just feather, it automatically applies to me. I didn't put my cursor. My cursor's way over here, right? puts it at my target or at my player, right? So it's a feather macro. It's really nice to just fade, feather, and run in, right? You don't have to worry about clicking the ground, finding where you're at, none of that. So I find this is a very supportive macro. Now you could make 2 macros, one for your team, one for you if you really, really wanted to. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just an extra keybind, and I know I never do it, right? Battleground Blitz, it could be a thing, right? You could Battleground Blitz, and then I would just click it. Like, I'm just going to click it and put it down on the person, personally. But you could just do a mouse over if you wanted to. Next up are going to be things like focus macros. So this is a focus macro I use. I just call it a grand macro. It allows me to use my focus macro on my target if I have no focus, right? And the reason that is I prefer mouse wheel down as my silence for 1v1s. Just for me, it's faster than my shift mouse wheel down or my control mouse wheel down. So for me, in a 1v1, mouse wheel down is my target. But in arena, if I have a focus target, right? If I set this guy to focus, it's 29 seconds. Let's do my stun instead. It'll stun the target, see? Same thing with my silence. So in arena, my mouse wheel down becomes focus, because if I'm using silence on a focus target, it's generally the healer, and I'm trying to stop them as quick as possible. So instead of hitting shift, it's just quick mouse wheel down, right? So you can use these kind of macros for both world PvP, dueling, but you just got to remember how to set it up, okay? But that's what these are. So it's slash cast, bracket target equals focus, comma, harm, bracket, psychic core, and you just change the name for all your spells, right? You can do mind control, silence, your horror, anything that you want to use it on. Just change the name and you're good to go. Next up are at cursor macros for things like MD. So I don't want to click MD and then click the ground, right? Or hit MD and then click the ground. That's an extra microsecond. I just click it. See? I literally just use my at cursor. No green on the ground, nothing, and it sends it. I prefer this kind of macro. It's just slash cast at cursor, bracket, mass dispel. That's all it is. So things like that. Next up, I think most of you guys should have is a cancel macro for all your stuff that you want to cancel. So if you see here, I have things like slash cast mind flay as my thing. Why is that? I have it tied to mind flay because in a mind control, if I mind control somebody and then mind flay, it won't automatically cast mind flay on my target, right? So I can't get kicked by accident. It will just cancel the mind control. If I am in dispersion, right? Get out of dispersion instantly, right? It won't cast mind flay. It will just get me out of dispersion. So these are things that I like to do. I also have it into my Desperate Prayer, right? Because let's say you Desperate Prayer and it heals you for 40% and gives you a 40% increase to your health, but your percent stays the same. All right. So let's say you're in Todd range. Let's say you Desperate Prayer and you're still at 14%, and then you get Todded. Well, then you still die. Well, a lot of time I'll Desperate Prayer for the heal and then cancel Aura my Desperate Prayer to bring my percentage of HP way up. So same thing with Execute. So there have been times where I've Desperate Prayered. I'm at like for 15, 16%. I know I'm about to get Todded or something. I'll cancel it and go up to like 30, 34%, which is I'm no longer in Todd range. And you don't always want to do that, right? It's a situational ability where you're like, oh crap, I'm still in Todd range. I need to cancel my Desperate Prayer. So it brings me out of Todd range. Now, let me give you a clear example of this so you guys can see. So let me take some damage. Oh, laggy as hell. Oh, that was lame. Okay, that was pretty... You guys see that? I had a fucking parachute. Let me just take micro damage real quick. Let me do one more. One more micro damage. Okay. So now we're here. And let me show you guys. Oh yeah, so see, I also have a little tip I'd give you guys. Instead of looking over here for my powered life, I do have it here. It pops up whenever I'm actually able to use it. But anyways, now to give you guys what I was talking about. So let's say I Desperate Prayer. See, my health is right here still. Let's say that I was still in Todd range. I can cancel Aura it, and look it. Now I'm out of Todd range. See how much health my health went back up? It just increases your percent back up because you increased your health by 40%. You only want to use this in the situation where you're in a death range or some sort of kill percent range, like execute ranges and stuff, and you're gonna get spam executed or taunted or arcane barrage or whatever, because you'll take more damage than just canceling, right? Outside of that, you don't cancel. You get bigger catharsises. You can disperse after that for bigger healing on your dispersion, things of that nature. So just keep that in mind also, okay? So that's just I would make that a separate macro, put that somewhere, and use that, okay? You don't have to. It's just, I'm telling you, it saved me in a lot of situations. But again, only when you're gonna die. I also have a separate macro for Desert Prayer Powered Life. So when I'm in, let's say I'm getting bursted, and I want Desert Prayer and Powered Life at the same time, I can spam my Desert Prayer, and it'll use both of them, right? It'll use both back to back. So I can Desert Prayer and heal at the same time, and I don't die in a go. Instead of having to do 2 different keybinds, that microsecond could get me killed. Who knows? I like to be quick with it. So I do actually have a macro for that too. So you can always pause the videos if you guys want to see the macros. So that's very important, I personally feel like. And then this one's a really, really good thing to have in Solo Shuffle. It's a ping macro. See how I'm pinging? This is really good when you're trying to hit someone and your teammate just doesn't want to freaking hit who you're hitting. And you're like, God, hit who the heck? Go this target. I have a macro to my Void Torrent because generally Void Torrent's like a burst. But also I can walk and do it, right? So I can walk and hit it. So I just have it macroed into my Void Torrent. So when I'm Void Torrenting, people know, hey, I'm hitting this target. And it saves me a lot of trouble in Soul Shuffle. I've literally seen people go, oh, okay, hold on, and then run to who I'm hitting. So I recommend you put that into some sort of spell that you guys feel is easy, that's not spammable. That's the big one. Don't put it into a spammable ability, because then let's say you put it into Mind Flay. Well, every time you Mind Flay, it's going to ping that person. And you could be Mind Flaying multiple people, whoever's in your line of sight, right? But generally, Void Torrenting a target is your kill target. So that's why I have it there. Or if I had Mind Games still, I would put it into Mind Games. But just something. Just think of it as a ping. You can always hit G, and it'll say look here. But G's, I have not the biggest hands in the world. That's way out of my abilities. So yeah, I would recommend doing something of macros for something of that nature for pinging enemies. All right. Some of the things I want to talk about now are some tips and tricks. All right, guys. Some important abilities to know how to use. So first thing I really, really want to talk about is the use of mind control. So I don't know if you guys know this, but there are things you can do with mind control that can save a lot of lives. So for instance, if you MC'd a Chaos Bolt before it hit the target. So if you were to mind control a target, the Warlock, as the Chaos Bolt's in the air, it will hit your teammate or you, take the damage away, and then it will refund that HP, because it will then consider after the hit that Chaos Bolt was friendly. And then you'll see their health go down and then back up. I have a video from a couple years ago about a lot of these tips and tricks I have, where it shows, I have people who help me with, I didn't have anybody on to help me show you guys these kind of things. But you can go watch this video. I'll link it below. A lot of these are still relevant outside of the Fade Master Spell one that I have on there, I'm pretty sure. But most of them are still relevant where you can do exactly that. You'll see me mind control a Chaos Bolt. It'll refund the health. Mind control a G-Pie. It'll refund the health. Mind control a Glacial Spike. It refunds the health. As long as you do it before it hits, right? You have to pretty much preemptively do it, right? You see the Chaos Bolt going, start casting mind control. They're about to die. It's your only option. You don't have a stun, a silence, nothing. And you save their life, right? So things like that are things mind control can do. Secondly, mind controlling abilities. So if you mind control, let's say a Ring of Frost, right? Let's say Mage puts Ring of Frost down, you mind control the Mage. That Ring of Frost is now yours. So you can tell your teammates to run through it, and then the enemy team will get frozen because the Mage is now your ally, which makes that Ring of Frost your guys'. So I don't know if you ever thought about that, guys, but that is a huge mechanic for you guys. Same thing with Darkness. If a Demon Hunter pops Darkness, he's about to die, or a teammate's about to die. right? You're doing a burst. He darknesses. Mind control the demon hunter. That darkness is now yours and no longer saves them from damage. So just mind control the darkness, move the demon hunter out of the way or whatever, and let your teammate kill them. Or you can drop it and then kill them, right? So, same thing with anti-magic zone from Death Knights. Let's say they're doing a go on you, a healer, whoever, right? And they pop AMZ to keep their pressure going. Let's just give this. That's the scenario for this option. You can then MC that DK, right, and stop their burst on, let's say they're playing with a Warlock and Chaos Bolt's coming in. Well, now you get that damage reduction from their burst and their anti-pressure, because now they are doing reduced damage to you, and all you do is say, "Yo, stand on that AMZ, it's ours." And if he has no Lichborn, he can't get out of the mind control, or if he doesn't have a priest or anything that can dispel it, right? Because you have to be able to dispel the debuff. So if you just, let's say he's playing with a paladin or whatever, there's no way for him to get out of that unless you get kicked. So you can just tell your team, sit in that AMZ, and they can live a go. Also, just take it to make sure that their team doesn't have that damage reduction with mind control. So those are some huge things I want you guys to think about when it comes to your mind control utility and why mind control is so good. Same thing with vortexes. You could MC vortexes, right? You can MC evoker not tranquility. Oh man, why can't I think of the name? The AOE, what's it called? Now I gotta look it up. Now you guys are gonna make me look it up. I can't. Communion, Emerald Communion. Thank you. See, I knew if I started, I'd remember. You can MC Emerald Communion and heal your team. If they pop Emerald Communion and you're about to die, you can MC that communion and it'll heal you guys. So things like that are huge to think about. But yeah, so that's a huge tip I want you guys to remember. Another thing you guys can do is deathing stuff. So I don't know how many of you guys know you can death things. I'm sure a lot of you guys do. Again, this is for beginners. You can death things like Poly, because the damage will go back to you. You can death things like Hex. You can death Fear, and it will break it so you don't get CC'd. Another big thing you can do is preemptively run into things and death them. So you can run into, let's say, a Ring of Frost, right? You can run, death the Ring of Frost, right? And then get out of the death, or get out of the Ring of Frost, and now you're on Poly DR, right? So let's say you see, a go's about to happen on a teammate, and they're going to go you. You see a Ring of Frost down, you run yourself into the Ring of Frost, break it, and now you're on DR. And now you can, hopefully, when they do poly you, it's a DR poly, and you can fade it, and then they get another poly, and then it's on DR, and their goes forted, right? You can now save your team. It's just a very good thing to think about, that you can break things like that to put yourself on a DR. What else can I teach you guys? I'm trying to think about. What other tips? Not really that many more. I got the macros. I got some tips. I have that video that I'll link below about some tips and tricks. So I'll link that at the end of the video because I have a bunch of stuff in there. But for the most part, that's it. I think we're done. I think the last thing I want to go over is some comps and rotation. So comps that are looking good for the War Within, since that's what we're going into. Feral Shadow Priest. Feral looks insane. It's bleed oriented. A lot of pad like Shadow Priest, and has burst like Shadow Priest has in the Archon build. Plus, Void Weaver's pretty AoE. So Feral Shadow Priest, and then you with a Shaman, maybe a Druid, double Druid could be good. We'll have to see, but we'll have to see the healers. But just for the DPS wise, Feral Shadow Priest, Lock Shadow Priest is looking good. Affy's pretty strong. Destro's pretty strong. I know they got some nerfs recently, but at least what I've been watching is Affy's pretty good still. So get the Affy Shadow play going. DK looking good. So DK Shadow Priest, like Shadow Cleave could be a thing again. And I think our best comp looking is God comp, Shadow play. So either Frost Mage or Arcane. It looks like Frost is insane. So some Shadow play God comp looks really good as our best. I would say our best comp right now. I would say RPS, but that's a very skill-oriented comp. I don't recommend newer Shadow Priest or people who don't know proper setup Shadow Priest to be playing that comp. Though that requires a lot of synergy. So it could be good at the higher level, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would stick to one of those comps. Maybe WPS makes a return. Warriors are looking pretty strong. So I would say something like Shadow Play, God Comp, WPS, or Shadow Cleave. And if you can get a Feral, get that FPS going. Those are the probably the 4 or 5 comps I would recommend. Don't do the niche comps that are out there. Like Ejrsp could be good. I just don't know if it will. Don't do like Devoker Shadow Priest because it's a very niche comp, easy to shut down. Scatter Play, a Hunter Shadow Priest. Like I said, it could be good, easy to shut down, not good for beginners. So try to stick to the more meta Shadow Priest comps I would recommend, guys, on that regard. Rotation. So the easy rotation I went over in my last guide, but I'll do a quick one here. If you're playing the Void Form Go, let's say you're playing Archon, which we don't have right now, so I'm not going to go over that Archon build, but I will go over just what we have in the pre-patch. What you generally want to do is throw out your dots or your Shadow Crash to get your dots up, throw out your Shadow Fiend, and then Void Eruption, Void Bolt, and then you can do a Void Torrent to get your tendrils out, but also to get Insanity, and then Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, right? Devouring Plague, if you have it up again, Void Bolt off cooldown, and then Mind Flay Insanity when you have them, right? Whenever you have Mind Flay Insanity, and you can cast, send it, all right? That's all you're gonna do. And then when you have a CC chain, right? So with your CC chain, what you're gonna generally do is Shadow Fiend, Void Form, right? And then you can go, all right, let's go. And then you can stun the healer, and then cast a Void Torrent, fear the healer, do some more damage, silence the healer, and then do things. That's generally how you're gonna do. You're gonna get your damage out, CC the healer, get your damage out, CC the healer, get your damage out. Don't let the healer get out of CC without using CC, unless, like, if you leave a gap, they can heal. And at the end of all of that, you're gonna siphon, right? Right before they're out of that last CC chain, you're gonna siphon at that last second. So when they come out and they panic heal, they heal into a 50% reduced healing, and they waste their NS, they waste their land hands, they waste whatever, right? And that's gonna be your rotation generally. Defensive rotation is based on what's going on with you, but you generally want to pair things together. So if you can do a pre-go, your pre-go, like I said, is going to be a heal, a fade, a Desert Prayer, right? This is on a burst comp, right? If you're going to a burst comp that's going to kill you in the stun, this is where you pre-Desert Prayer. Because then you're 40% more health. You have the heal wall for 10%, the fade wall for 10%, and then you're going to have your damage reduction, one of these, and you're going to have a manipulation, okay? So that's huge. But you're also going to get something I didn't mention. You're also going to get your passive. Where is it at? Is it under Priest? Is it just under Priest? You know what I'm looking for? Focus Will. There it is. You get Focus Will. So if you get hit by any melee, you get a 15% damage to physical and a 5% damage to magic. So versus RMP, this will be procced also. So if you can set this up against RMP where you're like, oh crap, they're coming, right? Let's say you have Power Shield 2. You have a wall, your 15 and 5% damage reduction. You have your 2% damage reduction, your Power Word Life, you'll have your shield, you'll have your other damage, right? You have a whole bunch of walls, 40% more health, you shouldn't die, right? You shouldn't die. Now, that's your pre-go. If you start to die, then obviously you're going to have to disperse. Do not trinket at that point. Because if you trinket, you have nothing to use. That is the wasted trinket. That's where people panic. And they trinket and still disperse. The trinket does nothing. You're not going to do anything if you trinket, right? You have nothing to save you at that point. You have no dots out for VE. If you fear, they're just going to trinket and they're going to finish their go on you. And you're still going to disperse with no go of your own. Okay? At that point, you just disperse. So you still have trinket and you still have void shift for the next go if you need it. Okay? And you'll have your fade back up as well. Okay, that's generally what you're going to do. Now, let's say you don't get to do a pre-go. Then your go is going to either be, if it's too much damage, right? It's a lot of damage, you can't live it, you're just instantly dispersing, right? Let's say it's Draco Cleave, right? DK, Devoker. Front-loaded damage, does a shit ton of damage, you're going to die if you don't trade. At that point, you can just tell your healer, I'm going to disperse this go. All right? They go you disperse the go, you live that go. The second go is important because then you're going to have to pair your trinket with this because you can't get your voice shift out before you die. You'll die within the stun. You're going to Trinket, Fade, Desert Prayer, and then run, right? That's your goal. They grip you back, you fear. You Lichborns, you stun, and you silence the Evoker, right? That's how you live the second go. And then your healer should keep you up out of that. And then the third go, your healer trinket saves you from dying in the go, and then you have your life swap if you still need to, right? That's generally how you're going to want to exchange in goes like that of a burst comp that you're dying in the stun with. Trade the dispersion. Don't be greedy. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. You still have trinket, you still have swap, you still have fade, you still have Desert Prayer for the second go. Okay, you don't want to use trinket and dispersion ever. You never want to do those two together. It's how you die as a Shadow Priest and why things become overwhelming. Okay, so just to keep that in mind, that's how you want to trade your defensives. Now versus pad damage, once you have your dots out on people and you're rotting. Let's say you're fighting a Boomkin with a DH or Ellie Shaman X or whatever, and you're starting to rot. When you have dots out on your targets, at this point you're going to want to Void Eruption. And then while it's in the air, you're going to want a Vampiric Embrace to start healing. And you're going to keep your team topped off through your pressure of your dots being out with your mastery and your instants, if you have it available, right? You generally want to heal through your pressure. And that way you don't have to worry about cooldowns when you guys are rotting and you guys get recovered and you're good to go. And then you can finish sending things off. If you don't have Void Eruption, still throw your dots out, right? And pop what you have. Right? If you have Void Torrent, use Void Torrent. If you have Divine Plagues, use Divine Plagues. You VE, you throw out your Divine Plagues, start Mind Flame, use your Catharsises, use your Void Torrent, heal your team through your VE. If you don't have the Void Eruption and you're rotting. But generally, you can use Void Eruption while you're rotting and still do your pad damage and then still have a go when you're recovered because you'll still be in Void form for a while. You could still, all right, let's go, 3, 2, 1, get a fear off, get a stun off if you want to. Right? Cast damage out, silence, right? And then siphon at the end of that, and then just keep doing pressure, right? So it's not always stun, silence, fear. It's not always fear, stun, silence. It's whatever you can do in the moment, right? But you want to pair them. So you don't want to like silence and stun, and you're way over here and you can't get the fear off, right? You want to generally get to them if you can. If you can't, then you can't, right? If you can't get a fear off, you can't get a fear off. It is what it is. It's not viable. That's fine. But you don't generally want to be like, oh, I'm free right here, right? I'm not CC'd, I'm not slowed. I'm not going to stun, silence, and then walk for the fear. What you're generally going to do is get your damage out. You're going to stun. You're going to cast more damage. You're going to silence, or silence and stun, and then you're going to fear, right? If you're right on the target, you can then just fear into a stun or a silence. See what I'm saying? It's going to be based on your position. How you're going to want to use that rotation, right? Create distance if you need to, close distance if you need to, and that's how you're going to want to use a CC chain, right? Based on what your position is to to the CC target is how you want to use your stun, fear, or silence. Okay, and that's it. That's the rotation for pre-patch. I don't have the talents for Archon. I don't have the talents for Void Weaver. Can't go over that in this video. I'll make a rotational guide and all that when the War Within is here. So that's what I got for you guys. Yeah, I think I went over everything, right? In detail, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, all right. I think that's it. Enchants and stuff don't matter because we're in the pre-patch. When we go to the War Within, again, another guide, I'll go over all that. But if you have any questions, leave a comment. If you have any videos you want to see, leave a comment. But please let me know if you like these types of videos. I know it's long, but I wanted to go over everything for new Shadow Priest. I just don't feel like people do these step-by-steps to go over things. So let me know what you think. And last thought, races, the best races, in my opinion, for Ally are Night Elf, Void Elf, and Dark Iron Dwarf. And then you can throw Human in there if you want. Human's never the bad option. Like, going Human doesn't mean it's bad. It just it is what it is. It's the 2% flat stat to all off stats, and then you have Will to Survive or whatever it's called. Human Trinket. They changed it. It used to be every man for himself. So it's not a wrong answer. But Night Elf I think is better for bursts. You can Night Elf a burst. You can Night Elf a Cyclone. Then you can fade on top of that. So there's a lot of outplay potential there. And then you have Void Elf for no kickbacks. So versus a season with low haste, you don't want to have those kickbacks, right? And then you also get 1% damage, shadow reduction with DKs being strong, Shadow Priest, Affliction Locks, all these classes that are going to be in the meta. It's an extra 1% wall. And then, of course, you have your cool little fake out. You see if melee are wasting mobility, right? So you charge, he leaps, boom. Oh, well, I guess I can't. it loaded me when I did that. But anyway, it would have teleported me over there, way over there, and it can waste mobility. It's a good little fake out for living. So, and then you get that 5% Shadow Frost damage for your passive that procs every now and then. Not a lot of damage, guys, but it's just fun. Entropic Embrace right here. And then Dark Iron Dwarf, because Ferals are going to look strong, and if Rogues are good, if Fire Mage or Frost Mage is good, you can Dark Iron Dwarf their Frost Bombs off, right? If they use a Frost Bomb on you, you can Frost Bomb it off, and then you can fade the next one. I got rank 1 as Dark Iron Dwarf. I just felt like Void Elf is going to be better next season. I could be wrong, and I'll go back. But again, I have 4 Shadow Priests, so they're all different races. So I can play any one of them. But yeah, so those are the 3 best, I think. And then on Horde, you have Orc for stun reduction, Goblin for the haste, and then Undead for the Will or Forsaken, and the Shadow reduction also. Touch of the Grave also. Essentially, they're essentially a Void Elf. Just thought about that. But yeah, can't go wrong with any of those. I don't think. I think Goblin with the haste probably give me the best, but I think people love Undead. And Panda. I don't know why I didn't say Panda. Panda on any side too. That end cap can be really nice. Panda on any one can be a top tier also. I just don't like the way pandas look, so I'll never be one. But Panda on Horde or Alliance also. But yeah, those are the races. I didn't want to leave that out. So yeah, Orc, Undead, Goblin, Panda on the Horde side, I think. And then on Ally, Night Elf, Void Elf, Dark Iron, Human, and Panda. So that's it. Now I'm done. Let me know what you guys think. Please leave a comment down below. Leave a like. I'm trying to make videos for you guys as much as possible. Let me know if you like these kind of videos or what videos you guys wish to see. All right, guys. Bye.